Okay, so let me start with the most basic thing. The entire heart, you see, is made of cardiac muscles. These are not ordinary skeletal muscles. They are specialized muscle fibers that have unique properties which we will explore as we go along. Now, one very important observation here. The walls of ventricles are much thicker than the walls of atria. Think about it. Why would this be? The ventricles have to pump blood to the entire body, so they need more muscular strength. The atria, on the other hand, just need to push blood a short distance into the ventricles, so their walls are thinner. This structural difference reflects their functional difference, no? Now we come to something very important, nodal tissue. This is specialized cardiac musculature that is found in specific locations in the heart. Basically, there are two main nodes we need to focus on. First is the Sino-atrial Node or SAN. It sits in the right upper corner of the right atrium. Then we have the Atrio-ventricular Node or AVN. This one is in the lower left corner of the right atrium, very close to the atrio-ventricular septum. These nodes have special electrical properties that we will see shortly. From the AVN, we have something called the atrio-ventricular bundle or AV bundle. This is basically a bundle of nodal fibers. Where does it go? It passes through the atrio-ventricular septa and a nates, that is the wall separating the atria from the ventricles. Then it emerges on the top of the interventricular septum. And here is the key point NM. It immediately divides into two branches, one going to the right ventricle and one to the left ventricle. Now, these bundle branches break up into very tiny fibers that spread throughout the ventricular muscle. We call these the Purkinje fibers. Basically, they are like the final network in the electrical highway of the heart. They carry the electrical signal to every part of the ventricular muscle, ensuring coordinated contraction. Simple, isn't it? Here is something very interesting. The nodal tissue has a property called auto-excitability. What does this mean? It means that these tissues can generate action potentials all by themselves, without any external stimuli. They do not need any nerve to tell them to fire, they just do it automatically. This is why the heart can keep beating even if you cut the nerves to it in the laboratory. Now here is the crucial point. Not all parts of the nodal tissue generate action potentials at the same rate. Different parts have different rates. But the Sino-atrial Node, it generates the maximum number, 70 to 75 action potentials per minute. This is the fastest rate in the whole nodal system. Because the CN generates the most action potentials, it takes over the control of the whole heart. It initiates the heartbeat. It maintains the rhythm. So we call it the pacemaker of the heart. Think of it like a conductor of an orchestra, no? It sets the tempo for everyone else. And because the SAN fires at this rate, our heart also beats at this rate. That is why we say the normal heart rate is 70 to 75 beats per minute. On average, 72. This is coordinated by the pacemaker, the SAN. Okay, so the cardiac cycle, it starts with something called joint diastole. What does this mean? It means all four chambers, both atria and both ventricles, are completely relaxed. Nothing is contracting. Everything is relaxed. This is the resting phase. During this joint diastole, the tricuspid valve, which is between the right atrium and right ventricle, is open. The bicuspid valve, which is between the left atrium and left ventricle, is also open. So what happens? Blood from the pulmonary veins comes into the left atrium and flows down into the left ventricle. Blood from the vena cava comes into the right atrium and flows down into the right ventricle. Basically, blood is filling up the ventricles. But notice the semilunar valves are closed. These are the valves guarding the exits of the heart, the pulmonary artery and the aorta. They are closed during this phase because there is no force pushing blood out of the ventricles yet. The ventricles are relaxed, remember?
Wow.
Now the SAN fires. It generates an action potential. This electrical signal spreads to both atria. Both atria get the signal at almost the same time. So they both contract together. We call this atrial systole. Nice. Systole meaning contraction. When the atria contract, they push blood down into the ventricles. This is important because basically the ventricles have already been filling passively. But this atrial contraction gives an additional boost. It increases the flow by about 30%. The atria are working as booster pumps and the ventricles, They are still relaxed, just receiving blood. Now the action potential travels from the AV end to the AV bundle. The AV bundle, also called the bundle of His, carries this signal throughout the ventricular muscle. So the ventricular muscles get the signal and they contract. This is called ventricular systole. The ventricles are now squeezing. Here is an important point. At the exact same moment, the ventricles start contracting. The atria relax. So when ventricles are in systole, atria are in diastole. They never contract at the same time. This is very well coordinated. As the ventricles contract, the pressure inside them goes up. This rising pressure pushes on the tricuspid and bicuspid valves. Now, as the ventricles squeeze, they try to push blood back into the atria, no? But these valves do not allow that. They snap shut. This is passive closure due to the pressure difference. The valves close to prevent backflow. And when these valves close, they make a sound. We hear this as the first heart sound, the lub sound. That is what you hear when someone listens to your heart with a stethoscope. Lub. That is the tricuspid and bicuspid valves slamming shut. As the ventricles keep contracting, the pressure inside gets even higher. Now this pressure is strong enough to overcome the resistance of the semilunar valves. These valves are holding the line between the ventricles and the arteries, but the pressure pushes them open. Once these semilunar valves open, blood gushes out. From the right ventricle, deoxygenated blood goes into the pulmonary artery on its way to the lungs. From the left ventricle, oxygenated blood goes into the aorta to supply the entire body. So blood is now actively being pumped out of the heart. After ejection, the ventricles get tired. They relax. This is ventricular diastole. The muscle fibers relax and the pressure inside the ventricles starts to drop. Now here is the important part. As the ventricular pressure drops, it goes below the pressure in the arteries. So blood wants to come back into the ventricles from the arteries, right? But the semilunar valves do not allow this. They snap shut. And we hear the dub sound. That is the second heart sound. Loop dub. That is one heartbeat. As the ventricular pressure keeps dropping, it goes even lower than the atrial pressure. Remember, the atria have been receiving blood from the veins all this time. So there is accumulated pressure in the atria. This pressure pushes the tricuspid and bicuspid valves open and blood flows down into the ventricles again. Now we are back to where we started, joint diastole. All chambers relaxed and then the stamp fires again, starting a new cycle. Lub-dub, continuously. Okay, so the cardiac cycle. What is it exactly? It is the complete sequence of events that repeat over and over. It includes the contraction and relaxation of the atria and the contraction and relaxation of the ventricles. All of this happening in a coordinated way. We know the heart beats about 72 times per minute. That means 72 cycles per minute. Each cycle is one complete heartbeat lub-dub. So if we do the math, 1 minute is 60 seconds. We have 72 beats in 60 seconds. So each beat takes about 0.8 seconds. Or roughly speaking, a little less than 1 second per cycle. Now in each cycle, each ventricle pushes out a certain amount of blood. We measure this in a healthy person. It is about 70 milliliters. We call this the stroke volume. Sometimes it is called the beat volume. Simple measurement. Now, if we want to know how much blood is pumped out in a whole minute, we multiply the stroke volume by the heart rate. 70 milliliters times 72 beats per minute. That is what we call cardiac output. So in a healthy person, at rest, the cardiac output is about 5000 milliliters or 5 liters per minute. 5 liters. That is a lot of blood. Every minute, 5 liters of blood is flowing through your body. Now here is an important point. The cardiac output is not fixed. Your body can change it. You can increase your heart rate or increase your stroke volume. Both happen during exercise. An athlete's heart is trained, so their cardiac output can go much higher than an ordinary person. That is why they have better endurance. During each heartbeat, you get two main sounds. These are the sounds that doctors listen to with a stethoscope. What are these sounds? They are actually the sounds of valves closing. The first sound we write as lub, that is L-U-B. This happens when the tricuspid and bicuspid valves close, remember? When the ventricles start to contract and the pressure goes up, these valves slam shut to prevent backflow. That is the LUB sound. The second sound is dub me c d u b. This happens when the semilunar valves close. When the ventricles have finished contracting and are starting to relax, the pressure drops and these valves shut to prevent backflow from the arteries. That is the dub sound. Now, why are these sounds important? Because they tell us about the health of the heart. If the sounds are abnormal, if there are extra sounds or murmurs, it can mean something is wrong with the valves. So doctors use these sounds to diagnose heart problems. That is the clinical significance. Now we come to something called the electrocardiogram or ECG. What is it? It is basically a record of the electrical activity of the heart. When the heart contracts, there are electrical signals. We can record these signals and display them on a graph. That graph is the ECG. The machine that does this recording is called an electrocardiograph. You have probably seen these in hospitals. It records the electrical signals from the heart and displays them as a tracing on paper or on a monitor. So how is it done? The patient is connected to the machine with 3 leads. Basically, these are like little stickers with sensors. One goes on the right wrist, one on the left wrist, and one on the left ankle. These pick up the electrical signals from the heart. These leads send the signals to the machine, which records them and displays them as a tracing. For a more detailed look, we can use more leads. We can stick additional sensors all over the chest. This gives us a more complete picture of what is happening in the heart from different angles, so to speak. Okay, so on an ECG tracing, you see various peaks and valleys. Each peak is labeled with a letter. We have P, Q, R, S, and T. Each of these represents something different that is happening electrically in the heart. The first one we see is the P wave. This represents the electrical excitation of the atria. When the ECG fires and sends out its signal, that signal spreads across the atria. We call this depolarization. Basically, it is the electrical activation of the atrial muscle. And when this depolarization happens, the atrial muscles contract. So the P wave tells us that the atria are contracting. That electrical change causes the mechanical shortening of the muscle fibers. The next major feature we see is the QRS complex. This is actually made up of 3 little peaks, Q, R, and S. Together they represent the depolarization of the ventricles. This is when the electrical signal spreads through the ventricular muscle. When does the ventricular contraction start? Shortly after the Q wave starts. So when we see the QRS complex on the ECG, we know the ventricles are about to contract or are already contracting. The R wave, the middle peak, is usually the tallest. This represents the main wave of depolarization spreading through the ventricles. Notice that the QRS complex is much bigger than the P wave. Why? Because the ventricular muscles are much larger and thicker than the atrial muscles. So they generate much more electrical activity. The bigger the muscle, the bigger the electrical signal. After the QRS complex, we see the T wave. What is this? This represents the repolarization of the ventricles. Basically, after the ventricles have depolarized and contracted, they now recover. The electrical charge comes back to normal. The muscle cells recover electrically. And here is the key point. When the T wave ends, that means the ventricles have finished contracting. The systole is over. The ventricles are now fully recovered and can start to relax into diastole. After the T wave, the tracing goes flat for a bit. This is the quiet period, the joint diastole. Everything is relaxed. Then the whole cycle starts again with the next P wave. Here is a practical tip. If you want to know someone's heart rate from an ECG, you simply count how many QRS complexes appear in a certain time period. Each QRS is 1 heartbeat. So if you have 60 QRS complexes in 60 seconds, that means the heart rate is 60 beats per minute. Simple, no? Now here is something important. If you look at the ECG of different healthy people, the patterns look pretty similar. The same basic shape of P, QRS and T waves. But if there is a disease or a problem, the pattern changes. It looks different. So by recognizing these differences, doctors can diagnose problems. That is why the ECG is so clinically important. It is one of the most useful tests in cardiology. It can tell you if the heart is beating irregularly, if there is not enough blood flow, if there are problems with the electrical system, all kinds of things. That is the power of the ECG. So blood does not just flow randomly through the body. It flows through specific tubes called blood vessels. These are arteries and veins, and these vessels have a very specific structure. They are not just simple tubes, they have layers. The innermost layer is called the tunica intima. It is made of flat cells called squamous endothelial cells. These cells are very smooth, which allows blood to flow easily without getting stuck. This layer is directly touching the blood. The middle layer is called the tunica media. This contains smooth muscle fibers and elastic fibers. Why? Because blood vessels need to be flexible, they need to contract and relax. This helps regulate blood flow and blood pressure. The elastic fibers allow the vessel to stretch and then recoil. The outer layer is the tunica externa. This is made of tough connective tissue with lots of collagen. It is like the reinforcement. It gives the vessel strength and stability. It holds the vessel in place. Now here is an important difference. In veins, the middle layer is much thinner than in arteries. Why? Because veins carry blood at lower pressure. They do not need as much muscle to function. Arteries need thick muscle because the blood is under high pressure coming from the heart. The structure matches the function. Our circulatory system has something special. We have not just one pathway for blood, but two. We call this double circulation. One is the pulmonary circulation, which I will explain. The other is the systemic circulation. Let us start with the pulmonary circulation. It begins here in the right ventricle. The right ventricle contracts and pushes blood into the pulmonary artery. But notice, this blood is deoxygenated. It does not have much oxygen. Why? Because it has just come from the body tissues, where the cells used up all the oxygen. This deoxygenated blood goes to the lungs. In the lungs, something important happens. The blood releases all the carbon dioxide it has been carrying, that waste product, and it picks up fresh oxygen from the air we breathe. Gas exchange, we call it. Now the blood is oxygenated. It goes back to the heart through the pulmonary veins. These veins bring the oxygenated blood to the left atrium. So we have completed one loop, the pulmonary circulation. Deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs, oxygenated blood back to the heart. Now the systemic circulation. This is the big one, the one that supplies the entire body. The left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood into the aorta. The aorta is huge, the largest artery in your body. It acts like the main highway for blood distribution. From the aorta, the blood branches into smaller and smaller arteries. Eventually, it becomes very tiny vessels called capillaries. These capillaries go right into the tissues. In the capillaries, something important happens. Oxygen diffuses out into the cells. Nutrients flow out, and waste products like carbon dioxide flow back into the blood. After the exchange, the blood is now deoxygenated. It flows through small veins called venules, then into larger veins. Finally, all this blood collects into the vena cava maxillary. There are two, the superior and inferior vena cava inch back, and goes back to the right atrium. So we complete the systemic circulation. Oxygenated blood out, deoxygenated blood back. The systemic circulation is enormous compared to the pulmonary circulation. It has to reach every cell in your body. That is its job, to give oxygen and food to all the cells and to take away their waste. The systemic circulation does not just carry oxygen, it carries all kinds of nutrients, glucose, that is food for the cells, amino acids, building blocks for proteins, vitamins and minerals, cofactors for all kinds of cellular processes. The blood is basically a delivery system for all these things. Most importantly, oxygen. Oxygen is critical. Every cell in your body needs oxygen to produce energy. Without oxygen, cells die. The systemic circulation brings fresh oxygenated blood to every organ, every tissue, every cell. But the circulatory system is not just a delivery system. It is also a garbage collection system. When cells respire, they produce carbon dioxide. This is waste. The blood picks up this CO2 and brings it back to the lungs where it is eliminated. Your breathing eliminates this waste. And there are other wastes too. things that are harmful or not needed. The blood takes all of this away. To the liver for detoxification, to the kidneys for filtration, to be eliminated from the body. So the systemic circulation is like a complete sanitation system for the body. Now there is something special about the blood from the digestive tract. It does not go straight into the general circulation. Instead, there is a special route called the hepatic portal system. The blood from the intestines goes through the hepatic portal vein to the liver first. So all the blood that has absorbed nutrients from your food goes to the liver first. The liver can check it, process it, clean it before it goes to the rest of the body. This is very important for detoxification and processing. Another special system is the coronary circulation. Think about it, heart is a muscle too. It needs its own blood supply. It cannot just use the blood flowing through it. So there is a special system of coronary arteries that branch from the aorta and supply the heart muscle with oxygenated blood. Ammonium state. And there's coronary veins too. These collect the deoxygenated blood from the heart muscle and bring it back. So this heart has its own complete circulation system. It is like the heart takes care of itself. And if these coronary arteries get blocked, the heart muscle does not get oxygen. That is what we call a heart attack. That is why coronary circulation is so clinically important. Here is something amazing about the heart. It can regulate itself. We call this intrinsic regulation. Basically, the heart does not need someone else telling it when to beat. It beats on its own. Because of this property, we call the heart myogenic. Myogenic means muscle generating. The heart generates its own heartbeats. How does it do this? See, through the nodal tissue we talked about earlier. The nodal tissue is auto-excitable. It just fires automatically. The sun especially, it sets the rhythm and the rest of the heart follows. You know what proves this? Transplanted hearts. When a heart is transplanted, all the nerves are cut. Yet the heart keeps beating because it does not need the nerves to keep beating. The heart is independent. It generates its own rhythm. While the heart regulates itself, there is actually a control center in the brain that can modify heart function in the medulla oblongata spinosa. There is a part of the brainstem at the base of the brain bone. There is a cardiac control center. This center can send signals to the heart to speed it up or slow it down. How does the brain talk to the heart? Through the autonomic nervous system. This has two branches. One is sympathetic, the other is parasympathetic. These two work in opposite ways. The sympathetic system. When you are scared or stressed or exercising, the sympathetic system activates. It sends signals that increase your heart rate. Your heart beats faster, it contracts stronger, more blood pumps out. Your body is preparing for action. The parasympathetic system does the opposite. When you are resting or relaxed, the parasympathetic system activates. It slows down your heart rate drops, less blood is pumped, your body is resting and digesting. Again, there is a hormonal component too. The adrenal glands release a hormone called epinephrine or adrenaline. This also increases heart rate and cardiac output. So you have two systems, neural and hormonal, working together to adjust the heart's output based on your body's needs. Hypertension, that means high blood pressure. What is blood pressure? It is the force that blood exerts on the artery walls. We measure it in millimeters of mercury, Hg, and we get two numbers. Normal is 120 over 80. The top number, 120, is the systolic pressure, that is the pressure when the heart is pumping. The bottom number, 80, is the diastolic pressure, that is the pressure when the heart is relaxing.
If your blood pressure is consistently 140 over 90 or higher, you have hypertension. It has to be repeated. One high reading does not mean you have hypertension, but if it stays high, then you do.
What does high blood pressure do? It damages the heart. The heart has to pump harder against all that pressure. Over time, this damages the heart muscle. It also damages the blood vessels. High blood pressure also damages other organs. The brain, it can cause a stroke. The kidneys, it can damage them and cause kidney failure. That is why hypertension is called the silent killer. You might have no symptoms, but your organs are being damaged. Coronary artery disease, KED. This is a really serious problem. Basically, it means The arteries that supply the heart are getting blocked. We also call it atherosclerosis. What causes it? Deposits build up in the artery walls. Not just any deposits, calcium, fat, cholesterol, fibrous tissue, these form plaques. And these plaques do not form overnight. They take years, sometimes decades to build up. As these plaques form, they get bigger. They stick out into the artery, so the space inside the artery, we call it the lumen, gets narrower and narrower. This restricts blood flow. Less blood can get through. When the blood flow to the heart gets too restricted, the heart muscle does not get enough oxygen. That causes chest pain angina. If the artery gets completely blocked, the heart muscle starts to die. That is a heart attack. That is why CAD is so serious. Angina. You might have heard of this. It is chest pain. Specifically, it happens when the heart muscle is not getting enough oxygen. The pain is a warning sign from the heart saying, I need more oxygen. Who gets angina? Anyone really. Men, women, any age. But it is more common in older people, middle-aged and elderly. That is because their arteries have had time to narrow. What causes it? Anything that reduces blood flow to the heart? Usually, it is atherosclerosis narrowing the coronary arteries. So when you exercise, your heart needs more oxygen, but it cannot get enough because the artery is blocked. So you get chest pain. What will them I say? No, understand go that's the biscuit. Mr. Understanding that the presentation and another side. See, they're being a couple chase in the one questions as well. Line being your son, like the feet, the young parents again, you don't understand better. Sharon would see it, learn that adding the level when you want to my lad even and when love that the middle left with the Ekman in the civil right and one and see as this number. This depends on the like that. They are feeling idea that it will be the children. Heart failure. This is when the heart cannot pump enough blood. Not because it stops beating, but because it is too weak. It is trying, but it is not strong enough. What happens? The blood backs up. It cannot move forward efficiently. So it pools. In the lungs especially, fluid leaks into the lungs. That is why it is called congestive heart failure. Congestion means fluid buildup. The symptoms, shortness of breath, you feel tired all the time, your legs and ankles swell up, you cannot exercise because you get winded too easily. Now, important distinction. Heart failure is not the same as cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest is when the heart stops beating completely. In heart failure, the heart is still beating. First steadily, it is just not beating strong enough. And heart failure is not the same as a heart attack. A heart attack is suddenly the heart muscle gets damaged suddenly because blood flow is cut off. Heart failure develops slowly over years. The heart gradually gets weaker and weaker. Let me summarize what we have learned. The heart is made of cardiac muscle. The ventricles have thick walls. The atria have thin walls. Inside the heart is a special electrical system, the nodal tissue. The SAN is the pacemaker. It fires 70 to 75 times per minute. That sets the heart rate. The cardiac cycle has distinct phases. First, everything is relaxed, joint diastole. Then the atria contract, atrial systole. Then the ventricles contract, ventricular systole. Then everything relaxes again. One cycle takes 0.8 seconds. Each ventricle pumps 70 milliliters. That times 72 beats equals 5 liters per minute. That is the cardiac output. We hear two heart sounds, lub when the AV valves close, dub when the semilunar valves close. On an ECG, the P wave shows atrial activity, the QRS complex shows ventricular activity, the T wave shows ventricular recovery. Any abnormality in these patterns suggests a problem. We have two circulation pathways. Pulmonary circulation takes deoxygenated blood to the lungs to be oxygenated. Systemic circulation takes oxygenated blood to the body. Together they form double circulation. Blood vessels have three layers. The innermost is smooth endothelium. The middle has muscle and elastic fibers. The outer is connective tissue. The systemic circulation delivers oxygen and takes away waste. Special circulation serves specific organs, the liver and the heart. The heart regulates itself through the spinal, that is intrinsic control. But the brain can modify this through nerves. Sympathetic nerves speed up the heart. Parasympathetic nerves slow it down. Hormones can affect it too. We also saw several diseases: high blood pressure, coronary artery disease causing angina and heart attacks, and heart failure where the pump gets too weak. In summary, the heart is a remarkable organ. It has its own electrical system that keeps it beating, but it can also be fine-tuned by the nervous system and hormones. When things go wrong, whether it is high blood pressure, blocked arteries, or a weak pump, it manifests as disease. That is why understanding how the heart works is so important. And that is why prevention through good lifestyle habits is so critical.
Meet Iyal, your AI study companion. Transform PDFs into smart study guides, practice tests, and flashcards for UPSC, NEET, banking, and any competitive exam.
Master your exam preparation with Iyal.